Matt Burgoyne's family has been growing oysters at Port Stephens for 65 years, but they're now facing their biggest ever challenge. The parasite-borne QX virus has struck the state's second most productive oyster-growing estuary, and the impact will be devastating.
We're not just in trouble, Port Stephens is in crisis.
So these are actually affected by QX
So
already?
these are all, yeah, so they're all affected by QX.
So is there any commercial viability with that?
So all he will do is die. So this here was chock-a-block full. We've already dumped oysters. So this is a total loss. This whole lease is a total loss. So that was 70,000 dozen here. I would say that within 2 years, if nothing is to change, you can't survive.
So what does it actually do to the oysters?
It's a protozoan parasite. It gets into the tissues through the gills, it moves through the tissues, but what actually happens is that it sporulates in the gut and basically tears apart their stomach and makes it impossible for them to digest food and get energy from that food, and the oysters just waste away. Okay, let's get them into the lab.
Mike Dove heads the New South Wales Department of Primary Industries oyster breeding program at Port Stephens. So far, it's been unaffected by the QX outbreak.
Yeah, there is risk. We do have broodstock out of Port Stephens, fortunately, and what we've done is put quarantine protocols for our hatchery operations, which means that we can bring in broodstock from certain areas and still be able to continue the program, most importantly, and get disease-resistant stock to other estuaries for hatcheries to then use to supply industry.
In a good year, Matt Burgoyne's company sells up to 180,000 dozen hatchery-bred Sydney rock oysters. About 20% of his stock is bred for QX resistance. Across the industry, though, most growers have relied on wild-caught spat. Commercial hatcheries were already struggling to keep up with demand before the QX outbreak in Port Stephens. But even if there was stock, growers like Matt Burgoyne will have little or no income for at least a couple of years.
We're struggling now to find ways to pay for our stock, to restock the farms and continue on. We're not looking for a handout, we're looking for help to restock our farms. We need to restock them with good quality stock and we need help to do that.
The New South Wales Government's focus has been on breeding disease-resistant oysters and supplying commercial hatcheries in New South Wales and interstate. It will supplement commercial supply if needed.
We don't want to interfere with the commercial market for those businesses that are producing those oysters, but if there's a serious shortfall in demand, then we will, to help the industry.
The DPI New South Wales Fisheries Deputy Director General Sean Sloan says help will also be provided to breed more faster-growing Pacific oysters and to waive fees to help affected growers to recover as soon as possible. Port Stephens growers may look to the Hawkesbury River for how to survive the QX outbreak. Here, growers like Rob Moxham were wiped out by QX in 2004, and then Pacific oysters grown to keep their businesses viable were smashed in 2013 by the Pacific oyster mortality syndrome.
It died in like 48 hours from being, you couldn't see anything wrong with it, until 100% dead in 48 hours. It was just incredible. Because our oysters are so naive, they haven't been anything close to being near this virus, and it's just had a total 100% wipeout.
Diversifying into goods transport has helped Rob Moxham stay afloat.
I just figured that from where we are here, there's probably 600 houses which don't have any road access, and because we've got a land base, we can provide a service with building materials, and if somebody wants a fridge up the river, well, there's no road access, so it's got to come by water.
He'll soon start growing oysters again in partnership with a Sydney wholesaler, and will also fatten stock for a South Coast grower, but he'll continue his river services.
If you haven't got cash flow, you can't do anything, so there'll always be people out there and they'll always want the need for this, but I mean, I'm a 4th generation oyster farmer and I'd really like there to be a 5th.
Sheridan Beaumont is one of half a dozen growers left on the Hawkesbury from an industry that once boasted more than 30 producers.
So these are my Pacific juveniles, and they're about 3 months old, and it's looking like at least another year to 18 months before they'll be ready to harvest.
So when was the last time you were actually able to sell your own oysters?
Well, it's been well over a year. We have been closed because of the constant floods, dam releases, rain, and then to add insult to injury, our shed burnt down, so we had nowhere to harvest them when we had a little window to be able to sell them.
Diversification has also been key to her survival. She's branched into tourism with Sydney Oyster Farm Tours.
So you've come at a great time. We've actually only recently got our latest babies. So they are very cute. I'm not being biased.
Guests get hands-on experience and learn about oyster production.
So, hands out. I think the fact that, people learn the story of the oyster, they can see, how difficult it has been. They can have a deeper appreciation that some of these oysters are taking up to 4 years before they can even get to their plate. Hands out. My legs are getting half wet, so I'm going to swap them.
The tours feature an in-water dining experience, which came about because of COVID-19 physical distance restrictions.
So a firm pressure on a 45. He loves oysters. I actually thought, well, maybe I can put everyone in the oyster lease because there's plenty of space, and I can socially distance everyone at their own in-water table. There were multiple hurdles, including having to get a development application to put these temporary tables in the water. And once I launched it, it ended up being I think a very successful business that I unintentionally started.
So these are your great survivors.
Yeah, these are the ones that survived the massive flood event that we thought wiped everything out.
James Brown lost close to 4 million Akoya oysters in the 2021 flood, but his Broken Bay pearl business is bouncing back.
What we're looking for when we're grading a pearl is size, shape, colour, surface and lustre. 5 things. So with sizes of pearls, we have our Akoya give us smaller pearls than the South Sea do.
Tourism is at the heart of the company's vertically integrated operation. The business almost certainly would have failed without its Shallador tourism retail outlet.
And we have a high button that's like a mushroom shape.
At least we've still got revenue coming through, whereas if we were still in the old wholesale model and everything had been wholesaled, then you would be waiting for 5 years before your next pearl wholesale revenue stream to kick back in, and it's just too long.
Before the flood, he was developing a food market for Akoya pearl meat from millions of oysters unsuitable for pearl cultivation. It's still an important part of the company's plans.
that'll give us a revenue stream within 12 to 18 months as opposed to 4 to 5 years. So everything we were working towards, we put in place prior to it, I think is paying dividends now and giving us that confidence to continue that investment and be able to see the light at the end of the tunnel.
There's another potential revenue stream for the oyster industry: carbon.
Oysters store carbon in their shells. They use it to grow their shells through calcium carbonate. And we know that roughly about 12% of their shells are made of carbon. So that actually sounds like a small amount, but when you look at the fact that there's the New South Wales oyster industry currently produces 75 million pieces of oyster a year, and currently there's about 4 years of stock in the water.
Brisbane-based marine scientist Rachel Marshall is investigating carbon offsets for the oyster industry. She says growers may also benefit from environmental offsets or ecosystem services, because oysters also reduce nitrogen and help keep estuaries healthy.
They're often referred to as canaries of the waterways, in just that they provide those cleaning services. They also provide areas for habitat. They have a positive story around ecosystem services and carbon removal, and being able to identify and even certify some of those benefits, I think goes a long way in promoting the industry as good, sustainable food production.
None of that will provide any immediate relief for the growers of Port Stephens. Millions of dead oyster shells will go into landfill.
At the moment, we're just filling a hole in the ground that was a low-lying patch of land that we have, and we're just continuing to fill that with the farmers, local farmers that are here.
The concern for now is survival.
We hope and pray that we will still be here, but there's definitely some challenging times ahead. I hope everyone can survive, but if I'm honest, I think we're definitely going to lose some farmers in this time.